Hello again, and welcome to the last of my little webcams here. Had to let the dogs out. Anyway, we'll be finishing up Chapter 7 on the Legislature. Going to start with how a bill becomes a law, so we can get up to the executive branch, which we'll be talking about when I come back. As you know, it's getting close to when we should be having the next test, but that won't be until we finish Chapter 8. I believe that's what it is. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Yeah, so there we go. Anyway, how a bill becomes a law. Well, as the question asks, which of the following best mirrors the process of a bill becoming a law? Well, we can do walking through a minefield, deactivating a bomb, flying a plane, fishing, playing baseball, or playing football. A lot of people say playing football because it's rough and tumble, but not a lot of physical action here. Unlike some foreign countries where they actually do get into it, it's not like that. This would be more like walking through a minefield. I'm sure a lot of you have maybe played Minesweeper, so it's kind of like that. Every time you put your foot down, your bill could die. So every time it moves along, great. On the other hand, if it doesn't move along, the bill dies. But just like in a video, there are ways that you can resurrect it so it comes back to life. And of course, when you introduce the bill, that's one of the first steps you take, and there's no way it's going to die there because you're just introducing the bill. You get up, you say, hey, how you doing? Here's the bill I want to bring, and they give a full reading of the bill. They do have to read a bill 3 times before it can be passed through the legislature, when it's introduced, right before debate, and then right before they go to a vote. So they do that just part of the laws. Anyway, they got the first 60 days are when bills can be, anybody can go ahead and put a bill in. I think we're coming up on the deadline for that here pretty soon. January, February, or no, actually, yeah, we already passed the deadline as far as that goes. Now, we can still get a bill in there if the Texas governor declares it an emergency bill. So they can always put a bill in anytime if the governor declares it an emergency bill. There's another way you can do it in the U.S. government if you can get 2/3 of the House to take the bill out of order, as they call it. The House can reconsider a bill, but they don't usually do that. Once the bill is introduced, it is then submitted to a committee for a committee to consider. This is where the bill could first die. If the Speaker or the President of the Senate doesn't like you, doesn't like your bill, they could send it anywhere they want. Usually to committees that have no interest in your bill whatsoever. They'll put it on the bottom of their stack, and they have way too many bills to consider anyway. If it's anywhere near the bottom half, it probably will never get considered, probably because they don't even want to consider it. I mean, if it's a nuclear energy bill and they're parks and wildlife, they're not going to consider it. So at that point, your bill's dead. But like I said, there are ways you can resurrect your bill. So whatever committee you're in, if your committee would be looking at your bill, then you can always, committee's job is to look at, edit, re-edit, rewrite bills so they make more sense. You can always throw out the whole verbiage of one bill and tuck the verbiage of your bill in there if you want to, or you can add it on as an addendum or something. So there are ways you can resurrect your bill. This editing process that we do, what is it? Cleaning the catch, refining the melody, playing with fire, threading the needle, shooting the moon, or marking them up. Now, a lot of people say threading the needle, but it's not that. I liked cleaning the catch or refining the melody myself, but it's marking up the bill. Marking up a bill is when you're editing it, rewriting it, and stuff like that. A lot of bills are considered rather complex, especially any that deal with money. How much is it going to cost? How much money is it going to bring in? Is it going to pay for itself or not? If it doesn't, how much is that going to cost? And stuff like that. Those are some pretty big estimates that they have to come up with. So this is what a subcommittee does. And so sometimes your bills, most of the time, bills will be referred to a subcommittee. which once again may or may not have time to consider your bill. So it could die there too. Now, if everybody's on board with your bill, then it can move through. On the other hand, if nobody really cares about your bill, after about the third time that it's died, you get the message that your bill just isn't something that anybody wants to worry about. So you just go ahead and let it die and move on to something else. Once it gets a favorable vote out of the subcommittee, that usually means it's going to get at least a review by the committee. Hopefully that'll also be favorable. And once that comes out, then it goes to what is called the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is going to give it a rule, and we'll talk about that in a minute. In order to get on the floor for a debate, the Rules Committee also has a little special calendar committee, and they have to put it on one of the 7 House calendars. The 3 that get the most attention are the first 3, the emergency calendar, the major state calendar, and the general state calendar. Emergency calendar, of course, it's an emergency, so we got to do something about it immediately, and that's usually what that one is for. They don't usually put a lot of bills on the emergency calendar. Major state calendar are things that they consider have-to-dos, and so getting on that one means it will most likely get debated. And then the general state calendar may or may not get to it. We'll have to see. There's the number 4 is constitutional amendment calendar. There are only certain ones that fit that description. They usually get considered at some point. They usually leave enough time to talk about any of those so they can get on for that. Local consent resolution, or the resolution calendar, 5 and 6. Excuse me, or 7. The congratulatory memorial resolutions calendar. Those are usually voice votes, yay or nay. Once again, these don't usually mean very much. It's NCTC Day. It's Kevin Davis's birthday day. It's whatever. Congratulations in memoriam for a police dog that died, or police officer, or something like that. Most of those have no real meaning per se. They just like to pass them. Get the official stamp on it. A lot of times, like NCTC got one for NCTC Day. They framed it and brought it up. Jane Nelson did that when we opened the Flower Mound campus. So, yeah, that was real nice. Like I said, the House, they consider all the bills. You get only a certain amount of time to talk about each bill. Getting on the calendar, once again, doesn't mean your bill is going to get a vote. They have a lot of bills to go through. Like we may have talked about earlier, 12,000 bills every year, and only 6,000 actually get passed. So you got a 1 in 2 shot, pretty much, as it were. Anyway, like it says, everybody always can. The House can always consider a bill out of order, but it's going to take a 2/3 vote. If you ever saw Legally Blonde 2, this is what they did to get their bill considered out of order, because it was already past the time that most bills could have already been considered. So once the session ends, all the bills get erased and they have to all start over from scratch as soon as the next session gets started, which is going to be in a year and a half. So that's why it's real important to get your bills pushed through as quickly as you can. And the Senate, they're supposed to consider bills in numerical sequence. Senate Bill number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. But they actually do it out of order. It's called an exception to the rule. And in order for a bill to be considered out of order, how many people have to vote for that? And the answer is 2/3. You need, of the 31 senators, you need 21 to consider the bill out of order. It's usually not that hard to get people to consider a bill out of order. But that does mean any 11 senators can block a bill. But what they usually, just like in the U.S. Senate, they can talk about bills forever. And so it's really stopping debate on a bill that's the problem. And so, in other words, they also need 2/3 vote to stop debate so they can go to a vote. And that's where 11 senators can block any vote that they want. So it's up to the Senate governor. They have a lot of pull as to see which bills are going to come up for even consideration or not. And so that's what makes them pretty powerful in the Senate, just like the Speaker is in the House. Once on the floor, debate begins, and they talk back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The House limits debates to a certain amount of time for each representative who wants to talk. Not all of them do. The Senate, on the other hand, has no reason to stop. They talk forever until there is a vote to stop debate on a bill. And this is where you can get some people doing the filibuster. Now, Wendy Davis did a filibuster a couple years back, got her some notoriety. That's why she ran for governor. Didn't do so well, but she went for 11 hours on her own. The record is like 36 hours, I believe, by Mr. Gonzalez at one point, which is really tough to do because the rules in the U.S. Senate are a lot different than the U.S. Texas Senate. In the U.S. Senate, you can talk about whatever you want. In the Texas Senate, you have to stay on topic. You have 3 strikes, and if you sway off topic, and it's up to the lieutenant governor to determine if you're off topic. After the 3rd time you get off topic, they basically take away your power of your control of the floor, and then they give it to somebody else. Usually, since they don't have a lot of time, even the threat of a filibuster is enough to have people say, hey, what is it you need? And a lot of times they can come to a consensus, but that hasn't really been the way it's been recently. Republicans have been getting a lot of representatives on their side, and they've been able to do pretty much whatever they want. So Democrats haven't had much of a say as far as that goes. And so it's been pretty partisan out there these days. Any bill, through the House or the Senate, has to get through committee at least 15 days before the end of the session, so they have time to talk about it. Any bill that is not passed by committee 15 days before the Senate or before the session is over cannot be debated. If it can't be debated, it can't be voted on. If it can't be voted on, it's not going to get out there. Once the debate is over, all it takes is a simple majority vote to pass a bill. And of course, that's just 50% plus 1. So in the House with 31 members, that's 16 members. That's all they need to pass a bill. And that's since Republicans currently have 20 plus, that's usually not a problem to pass whatever they want to pass. In the Texas House, 150 guys, all they need is 76. 75 plus 1, 76. And once again, they have 90-something. That's usually not a problem for them to get as long as they stick together. Once it passes both houses, look at the bill. If the bill is written exactly the same that was passed in both houses, it can go to the governor. If not, it has to go to the conference committee for reconciliation. Who let the dogs out? Yeah. Well, the conference committee is for a compromise. It's not considered part of the 140 days. So this is what they usually do, sort of a cleanup after the 140-day session is over. Bills that still need to be reconciled go to the conference committee. You get 5 members from the House, 5 members from the Senate, and they come together and they have to come up with a compromise that at least 3 of them on each side can agree on. So 3 members of the House must agree with 3 members of the Senate, at least. They can always have more. And once that happens, then they agree to the compromise. Yeah. Excuse me. Once the compromise is made, then it goes back to the floor of the House, back to the floor of the Senate, and it's a straight up or down vote. They do get 48 hours to read the bill before there's a up or down vote, but there's no debate. Generally, if you voted for the bill before, you'll vote for it again. If you voted against the bill before, you'll vote against it again. Rarely, like 1% of the time, people will change their votes, but that's pretty not very often. Actions by the governor. Once the bill is sent to the governor, a lot of different options that the governor can do. Of course, governor can sign the bill into law. Very simple. Woohoo! It's signed. It's done. Voila. Or the governor can do nothing. If the governor does nothing, the bill will become law without the governor's signature. It will become law in 10 days as long as the legislature is in session the entire time, or if the legislature goes out of session, sometimes within that 10 days, they add another 10 days onto it. So after 20 days, the bill will become law without the governor's signature. A lot of bills have become law without the governor's signature, especially under President Bush, on bills that they don't like, but not enough to actually veto them. Certainly not enough to sign them. And these bills will basically it gives the governor plausible deniability. Oh, well, I didn't like that law and I didn't sign it, so that was the legislature, not me. That's what President Bush did with hate codes. He didn't like hate speech, and that people could get fined or have extra jail time if they considered hate speech during a crime, making it a hate crime. So he just didn't sign it, but it still became law without his signature. A lot of times, I know Rick Perry, when he ran for president last time, thought, oh, if only I hadn't signed that DREAM Act giving illegal immigrants in-state tuition. On the other hand, really that's fair, because even if they're illegal, they're still paying taxes just like every other Texan if they're here in the state. We don't have income taxes, so anybody who buys stuff at any store pays a sales tax just like everybody else. So as long as you're still considered a Texas resident, which technically they are because they've been living here and for a certain amount of time, 60 days, whatever, they're still considered a Texan and technically should get in-state tuition. But that just doesn't sit right with a lot of people, so I don't know. There are two veto options that the governor has if he wants to. There's the full signature veto, where big stamp, boom, signs off on it, the whole thing is thrown out. Of course, the legislature can override with a 2/3 vote, but that hasn't happened since 1944 because they always wait till the last minute to pass all their stuff, the last week, so there's never enough time for them. The governor always has more than enough time to consider stuff. They can also do a line item veto, which is only good for appropriation vetoes, stuff that's giving money that's technically off budget, and that gives him a little bit of leeway as far as he wants to with that. How long does it take for a law to take effect? At the end of a legislative session, what's the regular amount of time? Technically 90 days, unless they 2/3 of either house votes for a different day. But 90 days is what a law goes into effect. Damn. This usually happens with a lot of the general laws, the traffic laws, for example. They get finished up, and usually around September 1, these laws go into effect. And then you've got a few months for the end of the year. Generally, on new traffic laws, when they first go into effect, if you break them, the cops will pull you over and give you a warning. But by the time the new year comes around, that's when they start handing out tickets as far as that's concerned. So 90 days is automatic. How many days after the end of the session do laws take effect? Additional players, the comptroller, they have two jobs. As far as this goes, it's with the budget. They define how much money they consider is going to come in over the next 2 years. And then they also, and that basically tells the legislature how much money they have to work with. And they also have to certify the budget after the legislature's finished and tell the governor yay or nay that they came in within their target or not. Some of these numbers they throw around are estimates, and so the comptroller has to agree with the estimates that the legislature came up with. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They haven't really, and haven't gone against the legislature in a while. Last time was Carol Strayhorn a few years back, and she made a deal with Perry that she would certify it if he would veto a certain number of things, and he did, so that wasn't a problem in the end. The media, they're especially those in Austin, are always good about following up with a lot of bills. As far as that goes, there's a lot of stuff going on these days. I think there's a nice article I was going to talk about with religious freedom and stuff like that that's going on. here in Texas, and we'll just see how that shakes out. That should be fun to look at. And then, of course, the courts, once the bills are passed, people can always sue, and they do. And we'll see if it can get through the court system, and if the court agrees that it's a bad law or not a law or whatever. Throughout the whole process, lobbyists are always supporting, ignoring bills, pushing bills, and stuff like that. And then, of course, the public, the general public, they can always make their voice heard. It's real easy. You just shoot an email to your representative or your senator in the Texas Legislature, and they will listen. I don't know if they'll do anything, but they'll certainly listen as far as that goes. So anyway, power in the legislature. There's the Speaker and there's the Texas House of Representatives. He leads the Texas House of Representatives. Who leads the Texas Senate? Yep, the Texas Lieutenant Governor. So that's why it's considered one of the more powerful spots as far as that goes. Both are elected separately. The Lieutenant Governor is actually elected by the people. The Speaker is elected by the representatives, but they both have pretty much the same powers. They assign bills to committees. They determine which bill is going to go to which committee. They also influence the debate schedule. They're always looking at what bill is going to be debated and when it's going to be debated. So if you piss either one of them off, that's a bad sign for any bill you got coming up, because they always influence that debate schedule. They have the power procedure. They determine who's going to speak, who's going to speak after them. If there are any legislative questions that they have to determine on, they will be doing that. It's kind of like the judge and running a court. Here they are, the judge running debate. They vote to break a tie. If there's ever a tie, they will break it one way or the other. And then they also do committee assignments. They're going to determine who goes on what committee and who's going to be the chairperson. So they assign bills to committees, influence debate schedules, they have the power procedure. They also have vote to break ties, and they have committee assignments. There are a lot of people who want to serve on two of the most important boards, the LBB and the LRB. LBB is the Legislative Budget Board. This is the one that has the biggest impact. They come up with the budget that is most likely going to be used by the legislature to be manipulated to come up with the final, so they get first crack at it. Now, the governor has to come up with a budget. It's largely ignored. It's the Legislative Budget Board, which the governor is on, that actually comes up with the first one. They also look at revenues and forecasts and expenditures and all that sort of good stuff. Then the Legislative Redistricting Board only pops around every decade, at least it should, after there's every census, and they're the ones that determine where the new districts are, how they're going to rewrite the old districts and all that sort of good stuff. And like I may have mentioned in class, this is real important. Republicans did a good number on the Democrats by capturing a lot of state legislatures after the last census. They were able to redraw a lot of districts so that Republicans would be in charge of a lot of legislatures, which gives them a lot of clout for the next decade until another census and a chance to redraw the lines. So there you go. Committees. This is where most of the almost all the work is done. Committees are usually given the nickname little legislatures. There are standing committees. These are the permanent groups established to handle legislation in certain fields. Back in 2011, there were 36 standing committees, 6 select or temporary committees. In the Senate, there are 18 standing committees and 6 select committees. These numbers don't change very much. Usually they add 1 or 2, or they take away 1 or 2. They keep adding until they get too many, and they take away until they get too few, and they just keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So 36 standing committees in the House and 18 in the Senate are pretty much the general average that you get most of the time. Most coveted committees to be in the Texas House are Appropriations, State Affairs, Ways and Means. Appropriations are the first people to hear how much money you want. They determine how much money they think you should get. And it's the Ways and Means that's going to really look at the budget and determine how much you actually get. So it's actually 2 chances every time at how much money you have to go. So that's 2 chances to screw up. Also gives interest groups 2 chances to influence how much money people are going to get. The third one, the State Affairs, that's actually a pretty new committee, and because everybody wanted to be on appropriations and Ways and Means, they came up with State Affairs. So anything that deals with the state can be considered by State Affairs, and that's pretty much everything. So it's just another way to get everybody to have a voice that they want to have. Texas Senate also did the same. They have Finance, State Affairs, and Jurisprudence. Finance takes appropriations, Ways and Means of the House and puts it into one committee. So they listen to how much money you want, and then they determine how much money you're going to get. State Affairs can stick its nose in anything it wants to that deals with the state. Jurisprudence is about the law, but it's also about their main job is confirming appointments from the governor. Whenever the governor appoints somebody to a board or commission, they have to be approved by the Senate. It's the jurisprudence that looks at all of those and makes recommendations to the Senate as a whole. No representative may serve on more than 3 committees. Texas senators are limited to 4. Every once in a while, somebody will get 5. You can't be on more than 2 of the 3 coveted committees, and nobody can be chairperson of more than 1 committee. Seniority rules. The longer you've been around, the more clout you have. You get to get into the committees that you want to get into and stuff like that. There are also interim, select, and special committees. These are all temporary, usually assigned for 1 issue, which may come and go. Sometimes there's a time limit, sometimes there's a goal, and stuff like that. Interim, they meet regularly, and every time the legislature is out of session. So these can go off and on for 18 months before the session gets started again. Usually they're to check on things, agencies or businesses. Unfortunately, here in Texas, we don't do a very good job of that. We let the foxes run the hen house. And it's kind of like, hey there, volatile chemical company, how are things going? Oh, they're going great. Yeah, just great, not a problem at all. Had a little spill a while back, you know, but hey, who needs fish, right? Killed a few fish, no biggie. Okay, that's good to know. Thanks. Yeah, works out really well. The select committees usually have a time span, and special committees are for ones that come up, like inauguration committees or census committees or something like that. For assistants, legislatures hire a staff. They have a certain amount of money for both Austin and their district. Of course, they can always add to that through their campaign funds if they want to. They can pay as much or as little as they want. What they've usually found is they can usually pay a lot to a few people who are really good, or they pay a little to a lot of people who maybe aren't that great. Usually Democrats give a little to a lot, and Republicans give a lot to a few. That's generally just how it goes. Then there are legislative councils that help the legislators. The Legislative Council will help in bill drafting and submission. And then there's the Research or Reference Library, research organizations, and the Senate Research Center. They're all there to help with research, which is kind of strange because with only 140 days in the session, they don't usually have a lot of time to research much of anything. So that's just how it goes. They usually rely on the interest groups to come up with all that research and stuff like that. Okay, so that's the end of Chapter 7. Have fun with that, and I will be coming back on Wednesday. So those of you who were there, we'll see you on Wednesday, and then we'll have start making up debates on Friday. Those of you who will see me on Thursday, we'll be doing starting the executive branch and doing maybe at least 1 debate then, except for my 2 o'clock class. Unfortunately, I have to go see the doctor on Thursday, so I'll probably just put up another video on the first half of the executive branch. So we'll see you. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.